Okay, so we get to officially welcome you. I'm on the call here for our workshop that we've decided to use the technology a little bit more easily. This is Laura Jane, and I'm here with George Castro, and we're really happy to have you here to take any of your time and energy to get into this with us. So this is our Conscious Parenting Workshop series. So we're going to do 3 of these, and we're calling this Choices, Connections, and Consequences. So we see it that George and I are getting to bring together our interests and our expertise in offering this parenting, enrichment, and education opportunity for all of us, really, George and I included. Right, George?
That is right.
Yes. So we're really happy that you're here to join us, to learn more and to develop all of our skills and our consciousness, really, as growing parents. So we've invited you here to support and feed you as a parent and to help you keep re-choosing your focus in your family life. And so this we are envisioning to be a conversation and even community circle style when you want to be with us live as a workshop. And we're excited to give you reflective and practical tools even to tune your parenting and your family life more and more towards what you do want. So we're happy to help you find ways to be more effective, more functional, and more in the flow with yourself and your family, right? So we're super happy to have you here to dive in with us and decide what choices, connection, and consequences might mean for you and your family. And we're excited that we see this as for parents who really want to foster more empathetic and empowered kids and family life. So we're super excited that you're here. And I know in a couple minutes, George and I will tell you a little bit about what got us here to do such a thing as this workshop. But I know we both are just really honored to be here and to even have the opportunity to talk about parenting, and that's such a personal, powerful, intense topic that we all care so much about. So we definitely want to honor that we all have our own truths within parenting and that we're not even really here to tell you what to do or how to do it. But we do have some things we'd love to share to help you keep re-choosing what works for you, give you some new tools. And I think we both agree that making it all more and more about connection is feeling like a great idea for both of us in our family lives and in our work that we get to do with families. So more and more about connection between you and your kids, between you and your partner, between you and yourself, between you and your world, right? So just more about connection in general would be the main thing that we'll encourage, I think. So, so I will tell you a little bit about myself, but actually I think first I'll ask George too, since you've already gotten to listen to me a little bit. So I just thought in a few minutes we could share how we got here and to do such a thing as a workshop like this. So hello, George. We finally get to hear from you.
Hi, Laura Jane. So just a little bit about me. Let's see. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've been in this field for about 25 years and probably have been licensed about 10 of those years. And basically have always worked with children. In fact, my very first internship that I did way back when was working in a youth shelter. And from there I went to probation, group supervisor. And from there, I realized that I really kind of wanted to be a therapist more than anything. And it was, as I was telling Laura Jane, not something that came real natural. Well, it came real naturally, but not something that I probably would have picked for myself. So it's something that is more of probably a gift. And I finally accepted that at some point. And so, that's kind of how it came to be. What else can I tell you?
And currently, what's your practice look like as far as what types of people you get to work with?
So that was way back when. Since then, I've done many things, and I've worked in the not-for-profit section of things for about, the last 15 years. And, so now I'm at a point in my life where I'm getting to use all my experience and all the things that I've done and to just primarily focus on private practice. And that entails usually young adults, children, and families. And so that's where I've been living and breathing. And as a unschooler, I should say, that is really what I've been doing predominantly the last few years, is just really working with kids that may be unschooled and homeschooled, because it's kind of a special area that isn't often talked about. And sometimes when homeschoolers or unschoolers have challenges or things that they're working with, it doesn't feel natural for them to just go to a regular therapist and who may then start on them about, what they're doing with them education-wise, and they don't want to have to explain themselves or defend themselves or anything like that. So it kind of...
So you've kind of come to specialize even in families with the unschooling situation. But it sounds like I hear how you really even bring the spirit of what you do with your unschooling into what you share with families in some of how you bring the perspectives in. So, and I think our workshop here is really intended for parents who have kids in school or who have kids that they homeschool or unschool. It is true that George and I both homeschool and really more like unschool, but I think that all of this can definitely work for parents who have kids in school, especially if you like to think of yourself as more of a conscious parent, and how you can even bring that in amidst the school life, right, George?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And then some of you might know George too because go ahead, George.
No, I was just going to say, I've worked in the schools. I've done so much in the field that it's really hard for me to think about all of it. But I've actually done school-based services in the schools, in the public schools in South County. So it's sort of like I'm very familiar, and if anything, that actually helps me to work with kids, because I see, the thing about all the children that I work with is that they're basically, they have the same needs. They have the same wants and desires. So that part doesn't change. And the parenting part, doesn't change either. I think that, the way that we work with kids, or the way that I work with kids, is the same. It's basically about respecting the child and the teen and who they are, and coming from that place of meeting them where they're at.
Wow. And I was just going to mention, too, because you hadn't added it yet, because some of the people who listen to this call might know you and your wife, Cindy Castro, because you do so many things in the homeschooling world and have a center in Long Beach where you've helped put together and offer classes for the homeschoolers. So, and that's somehow George and I met, was through those kinds of things. Anything else you want to add to what brought you here, George?
No,
here and now.
Here and now is Laura Jane brought me here. But what it is really for me is, you mentioned G, but again, that was something that we actually ended. We homeschooled our daughter because one of the things, and this is the easiest way for me to talk about it. We homeschooled our daughter because she was very gifted and talented at a very young age, and we recognized that. And the traditional school was just not going to fit for her. So the way that G came out of that was providing classes for her. And so we kind of, figured if these classes worked for her, people would probably be interested in the same sort of thing. So that's how it started. It started off with an art class.
And isn't that so beautiful? That's such a great story of how, well, like you and I were both saying, we notice in both of our fields, even though I too am in sort of the field of psychology, but, you know, yoga even more, which, you know, we know as a system of psychology, but how you and I both came to these worlds because we were looking at it for ourselves, right, and like figuring out our own life stuff, and just so often, and usually people who are in psychology or any of these fields, it's usually because you came to it for yourself first, right? And even that, though, that how what you're now creating and offering for families came out of what you were creating within your own family life, right? And so that whole, like, whatever we solve for ourselves becomes our gift for the world if we're in that mode. And I think that's actually cool to come up, because I was thinking some of the whys, W-H-Y, on this kind of workshop, or this kind of thinking with kids and family and even the parents, is that kind of thing. Like, the more that we can all be living in a way that we're actually able to tap into, like you, I know, do with your clients, tap into what we love and what we do feel like we want to do in the world, and even what we're here to contribute, the better, right? And so it's almost like, what kind of family life is going to facilitate that? Right?
No,
people
absolutely.
Who are feeling empowered and feeling connected and in their flow. So it means for the parents and the kids, though, right? But yeah, so how can you create a life for a kid that might facilitate that? And also, how as a parent can you have a life that's helping you feel like you're in that
absolutely.
mode? So what a great
that's the number
story.
one. Yeah. No, I was just going to say that's the number one thing. When people are looking for schools, or when they're talking about traditional schools and homeschooling and all these different options, I always tell people it's always about fit. It's like, and I also tell them it's about lifestyle. So, you know, it's like what works for one family may not work for another family. And so it's about finding your place. Yeah. Yes.
And I think I love to think that's what we're doing with this workshop series, is we're helping people keep figuring out what their place is and be willing to, like, create that for themselves. And I know for you and I, that means we're always learning and adding to our resources and growing. And so
absolutely.
This is our offering that in that effort. But that it's still going to be your unique way. And then maybe that's, you know, where I can segment into somehow I see my willingness to talk about parenting now is that I see a lot of it has to do with how we're taking care of ourselves as parents, and how we can be focusing on our feelings of feeling connected as a parent with ourselves and with life, and with our passions and interests, right? And then also with our kids and partners. But to me, I'm fascinated with, how much is that the key to parenting? And then the more you're tuned into yourself, you can parent from who you really are. And the better you're caring for yourself, then you can really parent from that better feeling you too, right? Your better version of you. So I feel like that's the place I'm willing to stand in. Like, okay, let's see what role we as parents can do. But yeah, I guess to share a little about me then, for people who I'm new to, I actually have been studying education and learning and humans and how we develop for most of my learning time since high school, and did wind up going through graduate school for psychology, but thought I wanted to do more like teaching, which I am now. And knowing I wanted to help people feel better, but I felt a little limited when I looked at it as just like talk therapy, I remember. So for various reasons, I wound up gravitating towards yoga and meditation, and basically, looking at my own interest in wanting to study those fields and even get some relief from different things going on in my life, including physical pain, and wound up really deciding that has become my way to help people. And, I love now that I see that yoga really just means to connect or to join. So now I can see that anything I do to help people connect or reconnect, we can call it yoga. We don't have to, but I can know it's under my craft of yoga. And, and then I have been in the effort of I'm interested in education and helping humans really become who they are. And, that's part of why we wound up homeschooling. I think my kids would have been fine in regular school, perhaps maybe too into the pace. But I was really interested in what happens when you get to really follow your interests and explore more who you are uniquely and how you want to learn. And we're loving how it's going. And now my kids are 12 and 16 and having a great time with unschooling, and I'm loving who my kids are and how their lives are going. And I'm even loving the experience of parenting. But yeah, so in the past I have offered parenting stuff, like peace parenting circles, but then for years I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about it. So for me, this is kind of a coming back to, because I do care about how children are being treated, that's for sure. And I do care about how, the humans in the family of all ages are feeling and enjoying their lives. So I'm definitely interested in, what can we do to make it all better and feel better and flow better and honor the individuals. So, I'm excited to kind of come back at it, but with someone like you, George, who has so much expertise, and then like you and I know, we always have so much fun talking and what comes through. So, yes.
Yeah,
so
I'm waiting for, I like that part.
Yes. The even more flow part. I know the telling, like, the story of ourselves, that part too, that's not my favorite part. But that's where I figured whatever came through, right? Now y'all know a little bit more about each of us. And so then let's go ahead and we'll get into what feels like more of our workshop-y part. But I think that's helpful for people to get, especially this first workshop, a little bit more about who we are and what got us to do such a thing as this workshop. But I'm excited to be recording it so that it can be listened to all over the world when people are ready. Okay, so you ready, George?
No. Yeah. I really didn't do a very good introduction of myself, and I find that interesting because I'm never good at speaking. No, I don't. I actually am really not good at speaking about myself. But what I will tell you is about parenting. And the one thing that I will say is that I think you hit it right on the head when you said, I don't know if these were your exact words, but I think the part where, as parents, we're our child's, first and best teacher, coach, everything. So I just want to say that first, just lay that groundwork, because, whenever I hear somebody is an expert or a guru or any of those things, I kind of walk the other way. I really do. And I've read a lot of parenting books, and, I'm always like, okay, that might work for you and that might work for you. But really, as parents, we are the best. We know our children better than anybody, and yet we kind of hand over that power to schools and institutions and to parenting books, and when we really are the expert. So I think that's the first thing. I think people, if they take nothing else away, well, that's one thing.
Yes, to trust yourself as a parent that you know your kid best and you know yourself best, right? And then as your kid even gets older, that your kid's going to know themselves best too, right? That you'll also be coming from that place honoring your kid having that knowing about themselves. But as a parent, I love that. So thank you to ground us, really. Ground us in that place. Anything else you want to say?
No, I was just going to say, because I think too much of the time, I'll hear things and I'll go, okay, that might work for a certain person and this might work for a certain person. But I think the main thing to trust, like I think you said, is that we know our children best. Now, we may not be the best at communicating with our children, or we may not be the best at getting along with our children, but we know them better than anyone.
Yes.
And so,
that's a nice distinction.
I mean, because good. I think, and I think the other thing to remember is that even though, everybody looks like they have it all together. Trust me, everybody is, like the little duck with the feet in the bottom swimming, really hard because it's the hardest job that anybody will ever take on. And I always tell people that. I stayed home with our daughter when we first had her, and Rachel, first Cindy stayed home with her, and then I stayed home. We took turns, and I was studying for my test at the time. And I was like, it was exhausting. It was, I was just like, oh my God, it is a lot of work. And I think people, predominantly women in our culture have traditionally held that job of staying home. But more and more dads are staying home. But it is such a tough job, and we don't give enough credit to whomever it is that is staying home with the child and raising them, because it is such a critical time for the child. They're hardwiring, the little brains are hardwiring, but on top of that, it's just mentally exhausting, and we kind of don't even really think about it. We just do it, as parents.
Yes, and I think that's so important to bring up here, because that may be a really important part of a more connected approach with ourselves, is first of all to just acknowledge that parenting is this intense job. And really those things you just said are true at any of the stages, right? In their own ways, for us to just acknowledge, wow, I'm parenting. That's something I'm doing right now. Because I know for me too, I sometimes forget that that's something that I'm putting my energy into when it's going smoothly, probably. And so that's a first step of even helping us feel a little lighter and even empowered to be giving ourselves credit for the work that we're doing as a parent, however old our kids are, and just the things that we might even add to our self-care again, because the fact that we are doing this added role, and just to honor that it is such a big, important job that has its own elements to it. So I'm so glad you bring that up, for us to all just wow,
self-care,
honored, and because I also think I love what you brought up about I think I'd love us too to be encouraging people to stay more inward though with where you're looking for your guidance. Right? We're not trying to say keep looking outside yourself for what's right with your kids, because maybe that constant seeking is actually disconnecting a lot of parents with themselves again. So then they're having a harder time parenting from what really works for them and who they really are. And that could be so much of a battle for a lot of parents, right? Because especially when you're looking outside at how people are judging you and your kids, that's another version of looking outside. So I'd love, for us to know that's part of the connected approach, is look inward more and more for what's true for you. Feed that, sure. And when you get inspired by other things or what resonates, sure. But what else? Yeah, were you going to say some more on that?
Well, the intuition, you kind of hit on it too, because the intuition, intuitively, you'll hear parents say, well, I knew that, about my child, whatever it is, fill in the blank, X, Y, and Z. But I kept on listening to fill in the blank, X, Y, and Z.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't do anything, or I didn't, it's sort of like we already knew the answer, but we were but all these experts kept telling me differently, and I'll just use the example of picking up your child when they're crying. People are like, well, they just told me if I kept doing it, they would stop crying. It's but the natural thing to do when your child is crying is to hold them. But we're told, and I'm not judging anybody who's done it differently, but and I think so we even override our own intuition about parenting, because we go, but this expert on TV is telling me, and so
oh my gosh.
And again, maybe that would work for some, but for some that would just tear our heart out,
Right, and maybe then what's nice, too, is we could think that we could use and I'm glad you used that word intuition, because that's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? Or, whatever the words you want to call it. But if we let ourselves parent from there, that might also mean that, sure, we might be learning and studying, but if something doesn't feel intuitively right to you, then just give yourself permission to decide that doesn't have to be part of your truth, right? That, gosh, but I think that's huge. So that's kind of funny for us in this workshop to be like, first of all, don't let anybody else tell you how to, don't look outside yourself too much. And, yeah, really that it's, in the end, it's going to be about you connecting with you, parenting from there, figuring out what that is. But, yeah, I would still vote for the better you're feeling, the different choices, parenting from a different version of you if you're doing the things that you love, right, that, that are part of your balanced life.
Now,
because we've seen that model.
So I just want to make a distinction, too, because now the intuition part, I'm talking about that gut feeling that you go, okay, I should do this, like pick my child up. But the thing is that the conditioning, that's the part I want to get in. So there's a difference between, the intuition of, hey, I should pick up my child versus, oh, I was conditioned to do this sort of thing. And I just want to put this out there too, that a lot of our parenting is just conditioning. It's stuff that we, were taught. And most people do not question their conditioning. A lot of people, we do what we do because that's what was done to us, or that's what was shown to us. Or the opposite, which is, reaction formation, where we do the exact opposite because they were X, Y, and Z. We go, oh, there's no way in hell I'm doing that. I'm going to do this. And so, and then we go out there and we become better parents because we research stuff and we find attachment parenting and we go, wow, this is cool. Makes a lot of sense, And that's actually how, just so you know, that's Cindy did the same thing. It's really interesting because Cindy's not a psychology major. She was an engineer. And, she came to me and she's like, have you ever heard of this person, Bowlby? And I'm like, yeah, She's like, because I'm the therapist and she's the engineer. I'm the touchy-feely. She's the analytical, or logical. And it's really interesting because I go, yeah, that's really cool stuff. Attachment is really important. And she found it through research because she's kind of like this logical person, and she went out there and said, how do I become the best parent? What's the best thing for these kids? And for her, it was attachment parenting. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Because then that's even a good example of being intuitive. If you're like, hell no, I know that didn't feel right. and then when you're studying and hearing from other people about their ideas, to give yourself that freedom to always still decide what feels right? And then in the end, only you are going to know what's right for you and your kids. And so that, I think is what we're trying to go where with this is that, and that's where I love with George, what I hear from you whenever you talk about the families you work with, that you're never like judging if they're starting to discover something's not working for them, because usually it's just conditioning. It's not because they're a bad person or they're doing anything ill-willed. It's just because of conditioning, having maybe tried or believed someone else even over themselves. I'm not sure how your process is with helping them with that once they realize that, but it's I love that because I feel like it's very non-judgmental. It's just kind of like, well, it's just basically what we've learned from others that doesn't work for you, right? That now as you're becoming more conscious, that you're deciding, I'm not going to consciously choose that one anymore because it's not working for me and my family, right?
Well, here's an example. It's very interesting because I actually wrote about this a long time ago. But before seatbelts were, invented, people used to ride their kids around in the back of trucks and in the back of cars. And I don't know if you know, but like my dad had like a 62 Volvo, and I used to sit in the back. There was like a little hat part. They used to call it a little hat. It wasn't a hat rack, but like a little hat shelf. And people would put their hats back there.
It's called a jump seat, I think.
Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I used to lay back there on the top of that and look at the moon as we were driving. And I just think about that now and I shudder because I go, man, what would have happened if he had hit the brakes? I would have went flying like through, something. And but it was like one of the best experiences of my life, probably as a young kid. I loved laying back there and watching the moon and, the little rain droplets falling on the back of the windshield. But as soon as seatbelts and now car seats, it's sort of like we know better. We know that's not the best thing to do. So it's sort of like once we know better, we do better. But just to add to that, because we live, in Long Beach, and hopefully I'm not going to get anybody in trouble, but, Cindy's like, George, come here the other day. And I'm like, what? She's like, there's this guy driving his kids around in the back of a pickup. Can you believe that? And I'm just like, okay, but it's, it's the context, right? Is like, is it a parade? No. They had won some sporting event in the neighborhood, and there's, he was driving his kids in the back of a pickup with no, I go, well, is he going really slow? She's like, no, he's going like average speed. And so, right away my brain goes all over the place, and, I'm going, oh, my God, that's horrible. But then I'm thinking, but he's giving his kids that experience that I had, but, it's sort of like, so no judgment.
It's not horrible, it's irresponsible.
Right.
Another word for it.
And then, then I go, again, he's probably thinking, I survived it. And how great would it be if my kids could do that? But, he's in the city, it's like, it's a big fat, no here.
Right. But yes, that was one of his unique parenting moments, right?
And I just decided. She was appalled, and I was kind of scratching my head going, trying to figure it out, like, what was why was he doing that? And they were yelling and screaming. They had won some kind of game or something.
Right. Well, and that's
like
even nice for us to remember how much we look at other people, and even as much as we think we don't want to, we might think we want to judge their parenting, right? I know, me too. I'm sure I do that. So it's nice for us all to stay humble, that everybody's different, every family's different. In the end, you know your kid best. I'm so glad you laid the foundation for that, George, that you know your kid best, and you and your family are always going to have your unique way, and that's really the base, some of the most important parts that we'd love to impart. So, well, now let's see. Let's go in, and I'd love to kind of take us through just this one little, it just takes a couple minutes, but it's this little exercise that I got from Alfie Kohn, because he does it at the start. He did it at the start of his talk when I went to see him the one time I did live. But I think it's a good one to kind of get us centered in when we're thinking about our kids and what we're doing with them, and things like choices and connection and consequences, which are all great words, even kind of spooky. And I love that we were playing with that word consequences, because that could be so many things, but it's almost like, ooh, am I sure I want to talk about that? But I think that's part of, why we would be talking about this, because we're interested in the consequences, right? The long-term effects of these approaches, much less the short-term effectiveness. I love this, Alfie Kohn, the person who does a lot of books and talks about kids and education, and he's so great that he always reminds that he just points to the research. Like when I did see him that one live time, he's like, it's not me, I'm just pointing to the research. This is nothing, I didn't say anything new. This is all pointing to like hundreds of studies. So, but that was convincing for me, even coming out of psychology as a research person at one point. But anyways, he would do this exercise with people. So let's see if we can do it with ourselves. And you can even think about it in your head or even write it on paper. So it's this idea to think about, like, what are your long-term goals for your kids? He would say, I can even, hear his tone. And so even, think about adjectives. What are the, the things you're really hoping your kids, go out into the world with, how they show up in a room, what are you really wanting for them? And let yourself, come up with some words. And when he would do this in this live audience, people would throw out words, like independent, strong, free-willed, or, but, some of these other words. And so look at your words. What are your words? And they may not be those. They may be lots of things. And that's where this is great, that we're leaving room for this is unique for you. And, eventually maybe part of your goals is honoring your kids' goals. But, but yes, if you're thinking about your parenting, what are your long-term goals? What are these adjectives, these lofty goals even for your kids? And then he would question, okay, so now let's look at how you're currently parenting them, and is that likely to get you and your kids to those goals? And to me, that just felt like such a showstopper. Because I think for a lot of us, especially maybe at various ages, we start to think it's more about like temporary compliance, would be one way Alfie would describe it, or just making it more convenient for us, right? But what do we really think about how we're handling our kids currently, and is that likely to lead to these long-term goals we have for our children, So, yeah, I don't know. What do you want? Do you want to say anything about that, George, before we move on, or what comes up for you with that?
No, I really like that exercise. I think, I just think back to when we first started, and with homeschooling, and I think that was one of the things that maybe I struggled with, is that I had this idea about what success was and what I wanted for like my views have changed over the years with conversations with Cindy about that, because, she would say things to me like, well, don't you want our daughter to be happy? So happy would be one of those, right? We want our children to be happy. And I don't think anybody would argue with that, And so that was one of the words that would probably come up for me. And I'm always like, I want, this is going to sound very hippie-ish, but you got to remember, that's part of probably who I am based on, my teachers and such coming up. But, I would want her to experience love, and joy. I would want her to feel those sort of things. So they're going to be a little bit more, oh my God, I just heard my English teacher turn in her grave, as I said, mine. My words would be a little bit, kind of like that. And then, of course, to have serenity, some kind of peaceful existence in this world. So they're not very, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, it would have been very different, or even 13 years ago. It would have been very different. Yeah.
That's a good point, that maybe it's cool to ask ourselves that every once in a while, because our goals that we think we might have for them might change, especially as we change. Yeah. And I know, I think some of the ones that would always stand out for me are about, like, wanting a kid that's willing to be independent and willing to stand up for themselves, and even really tuned into their own intuition, right? That might even be a lofty goal that a conscious parent might have. But then you think about when you're raising a kid and also wanting to help them learn to follow their own intuition. That sounds beautiful, but that also could be very complicated for you as a parent, right?
Right.
So I still think it's worth it. But that's where, when you're fighting your kids on this and that, or, forcing them through this and that, or, some of the choices we might have as parents. Right. If one of our big goals, for instance, was to have it, or if we really want them to be healthy with their emotions, like, then when we look at how do we handle it when they're expressing emotions? Are we just like, we can't wait to turn it off? Or do we expect them to go in the other room and handle it themselves? And then we wonder why so many of us adults have emotional issues, right? So for a long time, I've been curious about that. Like, oh my gosh, how do we teach our kids about emotions if we haven't even figured it out? That's clearly the case.
And I think you're right on it too, because I think a lot of what we want for them is, like, I think it really comes down to who they are and accepting them and what their gift is in this world and what they bring to this world. And I think so much of the conflict that we go through with our children is, we're trying to put them into some kind of mold that they don't fit into. And they're telling us that. They're going kicking and screaming, but we're not always listening. And so I think, and the way I say my words would have been different is, 13 years ago I would have said, my daughter needs to have a certain type of education. And even, this is hard to admit, but I'll, in transparency and being honest, I think it's very helpful for people. Creating G was sort of this idea of, I can bring all these wonderful, and it's still the same concept, but my daughter just has no interest in it, bringing all these wonderful teachers to her so that she can just, absorb all this stuff. But the thing is that, she was only interested in the art and maybe the math, but not so much all the other stuff. Some of maybe cooking, okay, maybe a few classes when she was younger. But, so what I realized is that we may have the best intentions of what we want for them, but it's really about listening and trying to let them become who they are. So my words probably would have been very confining for her, before. I'm not sure what they would have been before, but I'm sure it would have been more like, I don't know if happy would have been on there because I wouldn't have thought that was a lofty goal, to just be happy. Just to coexist peacefully and to experience love and to be able to love others. I mean, that's not, those weren't my goals 13 years ago, to just be like, Now that's all I want.
Yeah. And I think, like I mentioned at the beginning, like that's the one thing you and I agree, or would say for sure, that the more you can make your parenting and family life about connection, the better, right? And so that does seem to mean like honoring all the individuals as much as possible and then this whole element of choice, right? That we obviously always have choices, as do our kids. And what if we made more of our choices about connection, right? Whether it's in like how we decide to handle something with our kids or partners or family, or how we decide to spend our time with them too, or not. That if we just kind of, we're always keeping in mind the connection, right? So, and that doesn't mean like you're attached at the hip, right? I know you and I both have kids that are teens now, so that's really different, I know, in my family now. And so for me, that looks more like I'm looking for when my kids are ready to connect with me and doing my best to be available and present and ready to enjoy it. I'm also doing my best to honor that they're going through so many changes. So when they don't seem up for connecting with me, I've learned to not read that as them being a jerk, but them just like the cocoon thing really helped me to see that they obviously need that kind of like more inner time sometimes of the day or sometimes of the month or, and especially with all those changes. So yeah, as I've learned to, I guess that's in my more connected way to enjoy the teenage years. And then for me to look for more ways to connect with them. So yes, what can we do together? They're not always interested in going places with me, like, oh, let's go to the movies. They're not that interested in going with me these days.
Right.
So I'm kind of thinking like, ooh, what kind of invitations do I need to have that they would be interested? So, and I think that's something you and I want to talk about before we finish, too, is some of our ideas on ways to keep building the connection in the family, at the very least, right? To know that it's intense either way, or potentially in family life, and as you have all these humans growing and changing and working it out. But yes, part of making it more about connection is to even play with some of the things that people like you and I have discovered work to help people connect more than not, right? And because, again, there's ways we can spend our time together. So like you and I are going to suggest some ideas for things you can do in your time together with your kids that might build the connection even more than some other choices, right? Because just basically connection is a good idea.
No, absolutely. And I'm just going to plug somebody here because I think that HSC knocked it out of the park with the Discovery Con, and I'm going to tell you why. When I asked my daughter, I go, so what did you think? Because I didn't see her, and for those of you who don't know, it was basically around gaming and games. And so I didn't see her, and I go, did you enjoy it? How did it compare to the usual conference? And she goes, oh, it was awesome because it was, something the kids and young adults really could get into. This was their thing. It wasn't all this talk; it was playing. which is how kids learn, So
oh my
it was
gosh.
like she thought it was awesome. And I go, wait a minute. She goes, well, the other one is kind of like for you guys, meaning adults. And she goes, this was like geared right towards us. I'm like, wow. So kudos, to
well, and I
too
got so much out of that conference, and I attended a couple of those workshops on how important play is for us adults and for connecting. So it totally inspired me as well. So that's an example of an event that was a connecting thing for families to go to. The HSD Discovery Con Gaming Conference. It'll happen again next year.
So they're going to do it again.
Yes. So, and then, this idea of consequences, like, of course, it seems like we hear about that word with, like, teaching our kids consequences, right? Like, they need to know there's
negative consequences.
Right. So that's usually what we think of with consequences is, like, it's our job as parents to teach our kids something about the idea of consequences and that they seem to exist. And it may or may not be our job as parents to impose these consequences on kids. No, I mean, I've been a big fan for a while of more like natural consequences usually do the trick with kids, and that I don't think we need to impose consequences for kids to learn or adults. Right. But there's also other parts of consequences, like it's like what's the consequence of deciding to fight it out with your kid about something, right? There's a consequence to that, like the consequence to not making it about connection, to making it about something else, right? If you really made it about just making sure they got that thing done versus your connection in that moment, and you might decide that was worth it, but there's probably going to be a consequence, right? Which not that you can't recover it, but that's I thought that was the interesting part of consequences for us as parents to remember that we have a consequence thing going on, right?
Right, and I know we were talking about how. I'm sorry, and I know we were talking about how the consequences could be positive. It could be like it's just an effect of something. So if we do the connections and we make the right. I don't want to say the right, but we make choices that serve our family. The consequences are also positive. Those are the of our labor, so to speak. And I just thought of something right now when you said that. You said something about like if we make our child do something, or we make them, we force them to do something. It's sort of like I think of couples therapy all the time. The goal is to understand, not to be right. And I think so much of the time, if we get into any kind of these power struggles, I'm so used to, my daughter and homeschoolers in general that, they usually weigh in on things the way adults do. So it's sort of like, if they're given the respect and we find out like, well, why don't you want to do that? There may be a very good reason. A lot of times, they're making a choice too. They're telling us something by not,
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I love about our unschooling lifestyle for sure is that I feel like I don't have to fight with them nearly as much. I mean, I don't really fight. I don't feel like I fight with my kids really at all. I mean, might have moments of inflection or where we kind of like need to work out how we're being with each other. But I feel like it is because I don't really have to force them to do much. Everything that they're doing is because they want to. And you'd be surprised, right? We've seen what kids actually and humans want to do without being forced. So, and it's even better when they do it without being forced, right? So, but maybe that could be a whole, like, I'm sure people would love to hear a whole lot more on the idea of forcing or not. But that, I think, when you're looking at it and we have choices, is it about connection and there's going to be consequences? The whole force idea is definitely a big one in there, isn't it? As far as the ways it can go.
And I think, it's different for every family. And I know that, I was raised in a very authoritative, my dad was in the military, so everything was very rigid, very rule regimented. It's like there was no, which is very interesting and this is something to think about, like the way your parenting style, like the way you were parented or not parented. Because and I had never had that discussion with Cindy, like, right at the beginning. We had it, like, a couple of years in, maybe even, like, 3 years in, that we had Rachel. And what's interesting is that Cindy's parents were very permissive. And so you can imagine, I had this one set of tapes running, and she had this other set of tapes running. And so it really was about doing things differently and, finding, like, where is this happy medium of parenting? Because we were raised very differently, extremely differently, even though, like, there were a lot of things that were socially, economically the same. But as far as, like, values about, is it okay to jump on the sofa?
It's right.
So, or something like that.
Right.
Well, and that's the kind of stuff that, that we learn, and that we change our style of parenting, or, we come to some kind of understanding about what we want it to look like. What do we want our family life to be like?
And that's probably important to bring up, though, that when you've got multiple parents on the scene, which is a blessing, of course, but it does mean you've got now two parents with that inner knowing of what's right for them, and then you're also kind of working that out. So that's just worth being aware of, right, that you're blending two individuals' inner guidance or intuition about parenting. Right. So, and then, and that could be a whole other thing about how to have a more connected experience with a partner, right, and co-creating your family life. And I was just going to say, too, on this idea of force that I noticed, because even just today I needed to get my 12-year-old boy to go do his standardized test, and he wasn't thrilled to do it. So you could say that I could have called it like I have to force him to go do it. But I think that's where we get down to this piece that we mentioned in our description about empathic, empowered kids. Is sure, you could just like push and force and treat your kids in these certain ways, right? But then that's going to translate into how they are in the world and even how they are with you. So I feel like it's really nice that after years of, this kind of work in our family, that when there's something like that comes up, that we're able to have conversations about it. And because even my son can even hear my point of view and even hear the charter's point of view, why he needs to show up, and that he still knew it was his choice in the end. He knew he could have refused to get out of bed, and he's too big for me to carry him, But so he was empowered, and the fact that he's become a pretty empathetic person, I think, because of the ways we've gotten to do things, it wasn't a force, right? He made the choice from that place, and then I can love that, I think we have seen that when we use our power over our kids, unfortunately, they kind of can't wait to go do that in the world, right? They kind of think, this is how it works. The more powerful individual gets to kind of do this. So, but that's, I think, again, why even try these different ways? I think because of the kinds of individuals we might get to help bring into, by allowing these kids to be who they are and even become more empathetic and empowered, that we're trying to create different types of individuals, perhaps, maybe if we think of ourselves as conscious. And not even that we're creating it, we're more just allowing it, right? Instead of shutting down those natural instincts to be empathetic and to feel empowered, right? Because those are there naturally, but otherwise our parenting might actually shut that down, whether it's being empathetic or feeling empowered. So what do you think about that?
I do believe that, we are bringing a different generation of, children into the world. And I really love I love the homeschooling community because I think that I see very unique and creative and talented individuals that are kind of reaching their potential. They're kind of like, it's a very the way I see it, it's very strengths-based. So it's like, you like this, you're good at it, you want to learn more about it, great. And I've met such amazing young people. It's just, it's unreal, the talent. I loved the talent show at the end of the HSC conference because, you'd get to see so much of, the singing, and you get to see the talent, the musical talent. It'd be nice if there was a way to put artwork and have display, because it was brought to my attention that not everybody's a singer or a dancer or a performing artist.
We should totally add that. You're right. That's a good idea.
Or science, or So, but I love to see all the genius. I love to see all the creativity, and it's just kind of unbridled. It's sort of like no one is putting limitations and telling them not to do it, and that to me is amazing, because something in them is wanting to do this. There's this energy in them that is coming forward, and they want to produce it, and so much of that usually gets shut down, but not usually with homeschooling. Usually with homeschooling it's encouraged, so
right. Well, then what I think is nice is I think more and more families who are still wanting to have their kids in school are wanting to do that kind of outside of school. They're learning, they're seeing, let's make this about following their interests outside of school, and, helping them build on what their strengths are. I love how you talk about it, like the strengths-based approach with any of us, right?
Absolutely.
If we can just get more into our strengths. So, but that again, that if that's kind of what we're going for long term, is more humans who are tapped into their talents and their interests and what they even want to bring to the world, right? And even in a place where they feel like they can, and then they even have the empowerment to actually do it, that would be some of the great reasons to try this kind of different way, with being more conscious, making it more about connection, right, than about some of the other things you might think you're trying to get in your family life. Now, so I'm noticing we're getting to where it's probably almost been an hour, so maybe we could, just in the last couple minutes, share some of our thoughts on, in the name of building and rebuilding and continuing to build connection for the family, some of our fun ideas that you and I realize we like currently for ways to reconnect, right? So it's stuff that's going to reconnect us as individuals, reconnect us with our kids, our partners, reconnect the whole family, especially when approached in a certain way. So maybe I'll just kind of introduce what we were talking about, George, and then I'll let you share more what you know as far as how to approach these things. So just two ideas that George and I both like for, and you can be very creative with these, is adding more in your time with your family and kids, or inviting your family into these activities. More things that feel game-like or playful, and George will talk more about what ways to do that so that it actually can be a connecting experience, because not all games are created equally and not all play is connecting. But play, we now know, is very connecting. It rebuilds connection. We build positive feelings when we play with people, so we build it with them. So it's a great tool. And then also this idea of being creative, or even expressive art kind of stuff. A lot of us getting into the coloring books, or various things that we do that we think of as playing with art-like things, but more in an expressive way, not necessarily to try to create something beautiful, but just to express yourself. So whether it's drawing, coloring, playing with clay, vision boarding, things, anything that's that kind of thing can be a really cool, creative way to connect and reconnect as a family, right, or with your kids. So, tell us, George, what would you say more about those ideas for connecting tools with our kids and family?
Well, something that just came to my mind. I know we've done vision boards together and stuff like that, but one of the things that just came to my mind is, you really can do a vision board with the family based on things that you want or hope for the family. That could be really joining, actually, because people could actually, everybody has their part. They're all cutting out their own images of things that they would want for the family. And there may be things that come up that you may not be aware of, like maybe one of the children or spouses or somebody wants to travel, or, do more camping, or maybe they want to do, who knows what, dance, or, You know, it's sort of like, so that might be a really good way to, because maybe people don't feel like they want to talk about that or they never thought about it. And we've talked about, you and I, how, kind of vision boards get to the subconscious sort of part where maybe they hadn't thought about it, but now that they've been given the opportunity to, well, what would you want for the family, or how would you want it to look, Maybe they want a pet, and, we haven't really been able to hear that or didn't want to hear that or, but that might mean a lot to their development and to their participation. So I think that would be a good way to start something like that. Of course, we talked about games. We talked about, traditional board games. And there's so many games out there now that I'm just amazed. I played a game. Oh, God, I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not going to say the name. But I played a game with some of the kids just in the room, and it was really, like, interactive, and it was fun. It was, I think, relatively inexpensive, and we were able to laugh, and the roles changed. It was very interesting because you kind of identified with, it was a card game where you actually became a certain person that had certain powers that they did. And so it was kind of like this almost expressive art, like you're saying, because, there was one person that was narrating, and there was other players, and this could include, we played with about, I think, maybe it was 5 people, but something like this could be played with like an entire family, like an extended family. But at the end, we were all laughing and joking, and it was just like the best feeling ever. I had a great time, lots of better words there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to think of like all the ways we might be spending time with each other, and that's where, to me, nowadays it's so clear that those are connecting things to do and helpful because, especially if we're having moments of conflict with our family, to balance that out with moments of fun and laughter and, is going to kind of like shift the vibe and rebuild the connection. And so it just seems really beautiful as a way to
the other,
or just to do whatever works for your family. And yes, go on.
Yeah. I was going to say the other thing that might happen, because you said that about changing, if there is conflict, the way that kids work things out is they play it out. So in the same vein, maybe having conflict in a board game or in a game is an appropriate expression of anger, or, you know what I'm saying? That it's okay if it's done appropriately, if, for someone to be upset with another person, and that may come out in the game. I mean, that's a lot of how play therapy works, is that people, or children, young adults, they play it out. That's what we do.
Yeah. And I think it's so good for us to remember how the play is helping us as adults, too, because, like, we'll play games in the family yoga sessions that I do, and we'll do maybe gratitude games or even just very playful, simple things that are just as refreshing for us adults as they are for the kids, and for us adults to stop and play is such therapy and such a refueling thing. So we all, we can think we're sitting down and doing these things for our kids, but really it's amazing therapy for ourselves, right? It's reconnecting us and giving us so many opportunities to connect. And there again, there's a choice with your time, and there's a consequence to that. And you made it about connection, and what you did with your time together and how you handled it. And so go on.
No, I was just going to say that's a great thing to do with your yoga. I mean, you can tell people to bring their favorite toy, and most adults might look at you like, huh? But I don't think homeschooling parents would, but a lot of people would look at you like, what did you just say? Bring my favorite toy. So I think, just the idea, and if they say, well, I don't have any toys, well, there you go. You need to go get some toys. That's your homework. You need to find a toy, because you're right, and this is another really 70s term, but, you're really getting in touch with the inner child. You're really getting in touch with that part of ourselves that probably either loves to play, didn't get to play enough, or would love to play, and just our response to that tells us a lot, like some people are really, very easily will play. You say, hey, you want to play? And they're like, they're there, and other people, that might not have been part of their childhood. And, it's a good time to reparent ourselves and learn how to play.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you and I touched on, too, that it probably is really nice if when we think we're going to, sit down and play with our kids, that we do it in a way that's, inviting them in. And the more we can make it cooperative and even, everybody takes turns leading, right, so it's not get over here and play a game with me, or even some game that's super, if it's a game that's super competitive, it may or may not be a connecting thing for you and your kid,
That's true.
So I think that's where it's, to really, again, tune into what works for you and your kids and your family at this stage, because it keeps changing, doesn't it? They keep changing and we keep changing. So that's part of but that maybe is part of a more connected approach to just acknowledge that, wow, we're all always growing and changing and we're doing our best here. And that even can make us feel more connected, right? To just acknowledge what we're into with this family life, right?
No, absolutely. I just thought of something when you said that about, it can be really simple and it can be very, I just thought there was a Thanksgiving and I was at my brother's up north and his wife's family has a tradition of playing bingo and I couldn't even remember the last time I played bingo. And, but it was so fun, because there were so many of us and, it was a real easy thing to include 15, I don't know how many of us there were. Everybody got a bingo card and, we were laughing over, we ran out of bingo markers. We were using pennies and beans and God knows what else. But it ended up being really fun. And,
And it's beautiful, and it makes memories, and it really is can be a great way to build the connections, especially, again, with all the stress in the world. When we do anything playful, it's such an antidote, right? It's such a great therapy.
And it can build tradition. That's what I was going to go towards. That, you could actually do something now with your kids that actually ends up being a tradition when they're older. And you could, go, hey, we're going to play whatever, Yahtzee, whatever it is. And so it's something that could actually be, a bridge to, later on when they're adults and they're getting too serious.
Yes, and that even is it's still a way of connection. It's connecting you to 20 years from now. And again, to say that traditions, obviously, have a huge connecting effect, right? So neat. They connect just that. I mean, there's so much connecting going on with traditions, right, amongst generations, amongst people. And so, that's a great one. We'll have to remember to bring up more about traditions as a way to build connection. Well, it seems like it could be a good place for us to call this one towards a close. Is there anything else you want to say towards the end of this first workshop, George?
No, I just want to thank you. I said it off tape, but I'm going to say it for everybody to hear. I think you're really wonderful at, I know we have a connection and we tend to do this normally anyway. We just kind of have a flow. I think at this point I feel like, okay, we're just talking. But I feel like that's one of your superpowers. You're really good at bringing those things out of people, I think. And so I just want to thank you for that. Really appreciate that because, I think about things I hadn't thought about in I don't know how long, and you just tap into it somehow and pull it out of me. So I think it's great.
Well, thank you. And that's where, I am willing to use that word muse more in describing myself because I seem to be interested in, what people are inspired about and creative about and getting into that with them. So, and it's my honor to get to be connected to you, and I'm excited for people to hear more from you like they got to today because I think you offer such a great perspective that's really going to resonate with a lot of people that just want to keep enjoying their parenting experience more, right? And keep feeling like we're working towards those or even playing towards those longer-term goals we might think we have for our kids. I think it's exciting work, and I'm excited to be humbly offering this. So, okay, well then I'll go ahead and hit the end of recording, and thank you all for listening so much. And I know if you have questions or ways you want to get in touch with us, we'll make sure you have some links to that with the recording that we'll post here. So thank you so much, and there will be a next workshop happening next week, so we'll make sure you get a hold of that information and that recording when you want it. Thanks so much. Okay, adios.
Bye-bye.